Hey geeks! Let's start with some good news since we never get good news. A few months ago, I put Iran on my list for detaining UK citizen Zaghari-Ratcliffe, and after 6 years, both she and another detained British national were released. All because I put Iran on my list. No, that's not why, but it's still amazing news, and we all need some amazing news right now. Now we can get back to the usual depressing programming, but before we do, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. I want to give you the latest on Ukraine and then dive into a couple interesting angles on the crisis. So let's start with an update, and then I have a really cool retired US Army colonel explaining what the deal with the no-fly zone is. Then we'll talk about Russia's propaganda machine. Russia continues to face tough resistance from the Ukrainian military, even though Russia has ramped up its aggression further. Russia is now bombarding Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, as well as other cities. They bombed a military outpost in the west of the country, and in the south, near Crimea, Russia took the mayors and put Russian puppets in place. The puppet for Melitopol, for example, told Ukrainians living there to get used to the new reality, and said that Russian TV would now be broadcast there so that they could learn the, quote, truth.
Get used to the new reality. It's a good thing. Be happy. Trust me.
Ukraine's President Zelensky spoke to the US Congress this week in a moving speech where he tried to get Americans to relate to what's happening in Ukraine by explaining that the Russian invasion is like their own version of the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. And he said that President Biden, as leader of the world, should also be the leader of peace. And since the UN failed at that job years ago, I would agree with him on that. Zelensky said, "We need you right now," and he detailed what he felt was needed to push back on the Russians. So he asked for a no-fly zone, and as an alternative, he said that the S-300 anti-aircraft missile systems could also help. Those are badass systems that can be used to knock down both enemy aircraft and cruise missiles out of the sky. Zelensky also called for as many sanctions to prevent Russia from getting one penny from the rest of the world to finance its war machine. So President Biden announced more military aid and said we would help Ukraine obtain anti-aircraft systems. The US also decided to give 100 Switchblade drones, which are drones that are sent to crash and explode into their target. I gotta say, since I've been whining a lot in public about the need to arm Ukraine to the teeth, this looks like a pretty good package of military aid, especially if we're not gonna close the sky with a no-fly zone. We explain that next. President Zelensky has been calling on the world to, quote, close the sky, which basically means he's asking governments to establish a no-fly zone over part of Ukraine. But the US and other governments have rejected the idea. So I figured, who better to explain what a no-fly zone is and what's entailed in it than a military guy who's also a Russia expert. Retired US Army Colonel Matthew Dimmick joined me to break this down. He was also the former director for Russia and Eastern Europe at the National Security Council at the White House up until last year, and he was the Russia country director at the Department of Defense before that. So basically, he knows what he's talking about. Hi, Colonel. Thank you so much for joining me on Oh My World.
Well, hi, Hagar. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, well, we're lucky to have you. We're so lucky to have you, especially now. Can you explain to us what is a no-fly zone, what is entailed in setting one up, and why is the Biden administration so hesitant to pursue this?
Well, the title sort of says it all. A no-fly zone means that you restrict aircraft from entering a certain place, usually over a country or a territory. And the other part of it is you can label it no-fly zone, but you have to have a party or a number of parties who are willing to enforce it. And when I say enforce, that means being willing to shoot down any intruders that want to come into the zone that aren't allowed there. So that is a no-fly zone in sum. Now, setting one up is an entirely different story. You can say, let's establish a no-fly zone, but putting the architecture together, first of all, it requires fighter interceptor aircraft have to be close to the zone so that they can actually enforce it. And in an area the size of Ukraine, we're talking potentially dozens of those types of aircraft. And they don't fly alone. They are accompanied by specialized aircraft that are responsible for suppressing enemy air defense equipment. And those planes need gas, so you have to have tankers and refuelers in the area up close to where those planes are so that they can stay in that area on patrol. And then you got to have several radar planes and control planes to manage the airspace and watch out over the horizon. So it's a big logistical tale, not to mention all the air bases that you need, preferably close by so that they can be, shorter flying times to the area. And you need a, army of ground troops to support all that. And oh, by the way, those crews have to be replaced every several hours with fresh planes, fresh crews, and that has to happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for an indefinite period of time. So that's what a no-fly zone is and what it entails. Now, why the Biden administration might be hesitant, I mean, you won't be surprised to think that the Russians, in this case, are not going to be pleased by being told to leave airspace and being pushed out of Ukrainian sky when they've got ground troops in combat. So, and they've said as much. President Putin has said that he would consider any aircraft that were participating in a no-fly zone to be participants and combatants in the war, which means the Russians would consider them legitimate targets. And in the first second of no-fly zone enforcement, you can expect Russia to use every weapon at their disposal to try to attack the force that's enforcing the no-fly zone. Now, granted, U.S. forces, NATO forces, they can hold their own when it comes to air combat, but that means lots of Russian planes that are going to get downed, and also a bunch of Russian anti-aircraft systems that extend over 100 miles into Russian territory will have to be taken out. And as you can imagine, the Russians are not going to sit idly by. They will probably retaliate in some type of escalatory spiral. You can expect them to go after the air bases that those no-fly planes originate from, and they will use lots of missiles, potentially even tactical nuclear weapons. And once that starts a whole series of escalatory events in Ukraine, we're in a whole different place than we wanted to be when we started. And that's why the Biden administration is thinking twice about putting that series of events into motion for that very reason.
I see. So setting this up would mean that we would be militarily engaging the Russian military directly. I see.
It would be absolutely consider an act of war. The Russians would see it that way, and we would be at war with Russia the very first second we started a no-fly zone.
Wow. Thank you so much for this insight, Colonel. I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
In war, an information campaign can sometimes make or break a situation, and so the Russian government propaganda machine has been working overtime to try and distort the truth. We talked last week about thousands of Russians who've been protesting this war, and thousands have already been arrested, and some media personalities have risked their lives to publicly voice themselves. But what about the people supporting the war? What exactly do they think they're supporting? Putin has told Russian citizens that the military is in Ukraine to liberate Ukrainians from a government filled with, quote, drug addicts and neo-Nazis. So he painted it like Russia's invasion is a good thing, as though the Ukrainian people are under threat from their government. And so the Russian military has bravely gone in to take care of their Ukrainian brothers. That's why Putin had Russia's parliament make it illegal for anyone in Russia to use the words war or invasion regarding Ukraine. Instead, they have to use the term special military operation. Most Russians have no idea the military is literally bombarding Ukrainian cities and residential areas because they only watch state television. Now, the majority of them watch state TV, but now there isn't even another option for media because once this invasion began, Putin banned independent and global media outlets and he shut down Instagram. So he's created an information vacuum. Even with all these efforts, a lot of people still question him. So he just fabricated some new lies this week to justify the invasion by saying that Ukraine would use weapons of mass destruction against Russia if it could. Yeah, this country is going to use chemical weapons against that country, which has nuclear ones.
Duh, believe me.
This stuff matters, because one of the ways to bring an end to this is through Russia's domestic public pressure, and so we want them to know what's going on. The group Anonymous hacked Russian television to air what was going on in Ukraine, and I don't usually promote hacking, but I hope they do it again. Over the weekend, Iran launched at least a dozen missiles that struck near a U.S. consulate compound being built outside the city of Erbil in the Kurdish region of Iraq. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a paramilitary arm of the Iranian military, said they pursued the attack because they were targeting the strategic center of the Zionist conspiracies in Erbil. Oh, you hadn't heard that there's a secret Zionist movement in the Kurdish region of Iraq? The attack took place 4 days after Iran accused Israel of pursuing an airstrike in Syria that killed 4 people, including 2 members of the Revolutionary Guards. Israel, of course, could not deny or confirm this attack. I wonder what it must be like to be on the Israeli side of these attacks. If there weren't a war in Ukraine right now, I'm pretty sure this would be the biggest news, since the Iranian government just lobbed a missile at US property in Iraq. And it comes just days after the talks for a renewed Iran nuclear deal completely blew up in everyone's faces. Pun intended. Diplomats involved in those talks said they were this close to a deal, but it fell apart because of what's happening with Russia right now. Russia is a party to those talks, and they wanted assurances that it could freely trade with Iran and that no sanctions would get in the way of that trade. Now, I can't judge whether the deal was good or not, because I haven't seen it. But aside from addressing Iran's nuclear program, diplomats were eager to get this done because it would have put Iranian oil back on the global market, which could replace Russian oil that's been sanctioned. It's amazing. It's like a game.
This week we'll see which thug gets to sell his oil.
Given where things are with Russia, it looks like those negotiations are going to have to be shelved for a while. WNBA player Brittney Griner was detained in Russia exactly a month ago. She was arrested for allegedly crossing the border with vape cartridges containing hashish, which is an offense that's punishable in Russia by up to 10 years in prison. I want to stress the word allegedly here, because we have no way of knowing for sure if this is true. And authoritarian governments like Russia, Iran, and North Korea often fabricate reasons to detain Americans and others when they can use them as bargaining chips in political negotiations. Brittney Griner is one of the most recognizable players in the WNBA, and she's a 7-time All-Star and won Olympic gold medals with the US national teams in 2016 and 2021. So what was she doing in Russia? She plays for a team there during the off-season here. In fact, nearly half of all professional American female basketball players play for teams abroad as a way to make money. Griner makes $1 million per season in Russia, which is 4 times what she was paid by her team, the Phoenix Mercury, last season. This story has shed a light on a really ugly reality in the NBA, which is that WNBA players receive an estimated 20 to 30% of the league's revenue, whereas NBA players receive 50% of their revenue. And that's crazy, and that's something the WNBA better fix immediately. But I wanted to talk about this for another important reason. The problem is that she was detained a week before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and we have almost no information on the situation since Russia won't let her see a representative from the US consulate. So it's very possible she's being held as potential political leverage, which would mean that the Russian government has taken an American hostage. I asked you all if you thought she was being held as a political pawn, and 95% of you said yes. Russia just announced that they would extend her detention until May 19. And given that we have zero information on this situation, the Russian government, for this and many reasons, is on my list this week. We are celebrating Women's History Month at Oh My World, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to introduce you to a fabulous friend of mine who is a queen, literally the birth queen. Rachel Nix founded the nonprofit Birth Queen, which is working to save lives of Black mothers here in the United States because there is a Black maternal health crisis. This may sound like a niche topic, but Rachel, who's also, by the way, a mirror trainer, doula, lactation counselor, and actor, sums up why this is an issue we all need to urgently care about.
Hey, Rachel, I'm so glad to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, or us, I should say.
Oh, I'm so glad your little one could join us too, because it is so meaningful for this conversation in particular. Can you tell us what made you found Birth Queen and tell us about your mission?
So when I was pregnant with Baldwin in 2020, I was having a lot of anxiety in my 3rd trimester, like literally anxiety attacks started every sunset of my 3rd trimester. I blamed pregnancy, I blamed him. And with baby 2 going, wait, I never have trouble sleeping. I've never had anxiety attacks. I'm afraid, honestly, of bringing another Black son into this world with the way we are not caring for our Black men and women. And so I was aware that there was a Black maternal health crisis. I'm an actor, trainer, doula, and lactation counselor, and was like, you know what, let me just find a solution to this. I don't know that I myself, I know cannot cure it, but I need to do something to just calm my anxiety. So Birth Queen was founded March 8th on International Women's Day. I literally received my EIN on International Women's Day and just was like, let's get it. And I launched a year ago. And what the mission is to amplify and to create awareness around the fact that there even is a Black maternal health crisis. And for those of you who don't know, Black women die at anywhere from 3 to 5 times the rate as white women in childbirth and 12 times the rate in New York City. And our babies are twice as likely not to make it to their first birthdays. Our breastfeeding rates are around 35%. And the reason is racism, full stop, conscious and unconscious bias. And so we got to know that. And then the solution is simple. When Black women are cared for by Black women, the outcomes are positive. And so I want to make sure that we fund more trainings to pour more Black birth workers into the space, midwife, doulas, and lactation counselors, and to also ensure that every Black woman has the proper education, resources, and tools so that she can not only survive her birth, but thrive.
Amazing. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. I thank you for your work and keep it up, and whatever we can do here to help you, let me know.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, Geeks. Before you go, I just want to let you know that a 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Fukushima in Japan. But it still got me thinking that this can't just be coincidence. No, we don't have a war in Ukraine, a raging pandemic, and an earthquake all at the same time. So whichever one of you planets is off kilter, get back in line so we can get back to the normal depressing stuff like The Bachelor. Before you go, please like this video, click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more political satire. And if you have an idea for me, please reach out over social media and I will definitely give you a shout out. Stay fabulous, geeks.